From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News at 10.
In the final days of his administration, President Clinton has ordered that millions of acres of land be off limits to development of any kind. Tomorrow, the president will approve a Forest Service regulation that designates 58 million acres as conservation areas. Much of the land is in the Rockies and includes Pagoda Peak in Colorado. Pagoda Peak is located on the western slope north of Glenwood Springs. The other conservation areas include the American River's North Fork in California, South Quinault Ridge in Washington State, and Alaska's Tongass National Forest. The new regulation prohibits new logging and commercial development. Supporters say it is a masterstroke of environmental defense. Critics, though, warn it will block drilling for natural gas needed to heat homes.
Cutting-edge medical technology saved the...
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News Daybreak.
President Clinton is expected to designate 58 million acres of forest land as conservation areas today, making it off limits to any kind of development. Much of the land is in the Rockies and includes Pagoda Peak in Colorado. Pagoda Peak is located on the western slope north of Glenwood Springs. Other conservation areas include the American River's North Fork in California, South Quinault Ridge in Washington State, and Alaska's Tongass National Forest. The new Forest Service regulation prohibits logging and commercial development. Supporters say it is a masterstroke of environmental defense, but critics warn that it's going to block drilling for natural gas needed to heat homes.
1 year after
From Colorado's news leader, this is 9 News 6 a.m.
Today, President Clinton will approve a Forest Service regulation that limits logging and development in nearly 60 million acres of national forest land. Many Republicans in Congress are already urging President-elect Bush to reverse that decision. The plan covers 38 states, mostly in the West. One of the places included in Colorado is Pagoda Peak, that is on the western slope just north of Glenwood Springs. Colorado Governor Bill Owens says he is upset about the decision because President Clinton failed to involve state and local leaders in the planning process. Owens says he hopes the plan is overturned when the Bush administration takes office.
Despite some heavy snow in the past few
You're watching Colorado's News Channel. This is News 4 at 10.
Well, firefighters had hoped to have a wildfire burning near San Diego contained tonight, but now they say it could be Monday. That fire has scorched more than 10,000 acres in Alpine, west of San Diego. Cooler temperatures and rising humidity have helped the firefighters today. But so far, that fire has destroyed 6 homes. That happened earlier this week. It's believed the fire was started by a cigarette thrown from a car early Wednesday morning. The Forest Service says the fire is 60% surrounded, and many of the firefighters have already been sent home. Well, Congress officially put George...
President Clinton has announced a sweeping new measure to protect U.S. forests from road construction and logging. He made that announcement at the National Arboretum in Washington today. It'll protect about a third of all U.S. Forest Service land in 39 states, including California. It is the latest in a series of new rules the president is rushing to impose before his presidency ends on January 20th.
Firefighting is dangerous, back-breaking work. It's also a job a lot of people want to have. And today, there was one place where some folks got their first shot at it. Cheryl Kahn has more.
Yeah, make sure you keep it out of ladder fuel.
You've seen them on TV. Forest Service firefighters battling wildfires. It's a tough, dangerous, uncomfortable job, and these people can't wait to do it.
You could put A on it, jump out of airplane.
Some of them may have a chance. They're among the applicants vying for more than 3,000 U.S. Forest Service firefighting positions around the country. At job fairs like this one in South Central, veteran firefighters answer questions.
California is hiring the most.
And help wannabe firefighters with the pages of paperwork.
What is your experience as far as fire suppression in a hand crew?
That could send them on their way to this. To stand a chance of making it, they must be willing to work in primitive conditions, sometimes going days on end without a shower, and they have to be pretty strong.
We construct line, we lay hose, we hike up mountains, we stay overnight on the mountains. You have to have lots of endurance because we go hours and hours without a break.
Carolyn Goretzky and Brian Wilson lead commercial camping trips and are also boyfriend and girlfriend. They say handling the gear should be no problem.
Pretty light, actually.
They look at the whole experience as an adventure.
I kind of find it fascinating, interesting.
And they both say they have what it takes to do the job.
Just the motivation to help, not just fires, but people as well, and some of the medical aspects behind it. It's just a genuine concern for people and places.
If they do make it, they'll work 6 months out of the year, starting at $9.55 an hour with lots of overtime and lots of stories to tell at the end of the fire season. In South Central, Cheryl Kahn, Fox 11 News.
Action News, Delaware Valley's leading news program, with David Murphy, Scott Palmer, and Anita Brickman.
Welcome back. President Clinton has announced a sweeping measure to protect forests from road construction and logging. Clinton made that announcement at the National Arboretum in Washington. The measure protects nearly 60 million acres of Forest Service land in 39 states. Critics say the policy will disrupt new exploration for oil and natural gas.
Denver 7. This is 7 News at 11.
According to the U.S. Forest Service, the ban on new national forest roads has little impact on existing ski areas. Officials say the rules won't prohibit those ski areas from expanding inside their permit areas, building roads, or cutting timber to construct ski runs. But it does block efforts to expand ski areas or build or develop new ones. The U.S. Forest Service handed down that rule on Friday.
There's a job opening in town that has lots of people lined up and even camping out. That's because West Metro Fire is looking for a few good firefighters. Every 2 years, West Metro Fire holds a testing process to determine a hiring list. And from that list, people are hired to replace those who leave through attrition, such as retirement, or to increase their actual workforce. Some potential candidates camped out at Fire Station number 10.
This afternoon, President Clinton announced a sweeping measure to protect U.S. forests from road construction and logging. Mr. Clinton ordered about a third of all U.S. Forest Service lands be safeguarded. That adds up to almost 60 million acres. The rule affects 39 states. Most are in the West, but forests in Virginia and West Virginia are included. Critics say this policy will hurt new exploration for oil and natural gas. The order is expected to be challenged in Congress and in the courts.
WXI TV in Atlanta. You're watching 11 Alive News at 5:30.
For those of you just joining us, welcome back. I'm Dee O'Reilly.
And I'm Wes Sargentson. Metro area teens could have to wait an extra year to get their driver's licenses.
The story tops today's local news. Governor Roy Barnes says today he's considering legislation. President Clinton makes one of his biggest conservation moves just days before leaving office. The president has approved a Forest Service regulation which will make 58 million acres off limits to most new road construction, logging, and commercial development. Most of the affected land is in the Rockies, but the rule will take effect in Alaska's Tongass National Forest in 2004. President-elect Bush and others have expressed interest in opening some of Alaska's wildlife areas to oil drilling.
Covering the day's local news, this is News 10 at 6.
Some precious, pristine parts of the Tahoe National Forest may stay that way, along with other national forests.
And that's thanks to an executive order President Clinton calls his gift to future generations. But some Republicans say the plan to protect a third of federal forest land from logging and road building goes too far. Millions of acres across the country show no signs of civilization, no logging, no traffic, a place where the animals rule. President Clinton wants to make sure it stays that way.
These areas represent some of the last, best unprotected wildlands anywhere in America.
The new federal protection is massive, extending to federal forests in nearly 40 states. Under the executive order, commercial logging is severely limited. The ban on road construction covers 58 million acres.
We acknowledge that we cannot afford to maintain the roads that we have. It just didn't make sense to us to build more roads when we can't really take care of what we already have. So why not stop building roads in the areas that are extremely sensitive and controversial?
The new regulations protect a wide stretch in Northern California, including the Plumas, Tahoe, El Dorado, and Stanislaus National Forests, and the Lake Tahoe Basin.
We have in common our view that nature is a priceless but fragile gift, an important part of the fabric of our lives, and a major part of our responsibility to our children.
Some Republicans say today's order hurts the timber, mining, and energy industries, that it's too restrictive.
This administration in its final days has been a busy beaver, and we will review all regulations and executive orders upon coming into office on January 20th.
Critics say what the outgoing president gave environmentalists in one executive order, the incoming president just may take away with an order of his own. And for a link to detailed information and maps of the national forests that are affected, just click onto our website at kxtv10.com.
'49 News at 10.
What seemed like a sturdy, dependable, portable crib, we had no idea.
This Washington State baby died after getting trapped in a baby crib. Tonight, her family says, don't let it happen to you. Good evening, I'm Eric Schmidt.
And I'm Stephanie Fisher. Welcome to Fox 49 News at 10.
With only 2 weeks left in his presidency, Bill Clinton has the timber industry and some Republicans up in arms. He just declared about 60 million acres of forest land off limits by announcing a forest protection rule in 38 states. Fox's David Schuster has more.
Determined to establish an environmental legacy, President Clinton appeared in the National Arboretum and declared nearly a third of the country's federal forest lands off limits to most logging.
I am proud to announce that we will protect nearly 60 million acres of pristine forest land for future generations. That is an area greater in size than all our national parks combined.
It's also an area that includes 9 million acres in Alaska's Tongass National Forest, something the administration wasn't even considering 6 months ago. Under the rules, the Forest Service will ban road building where no roads currently exist. That means all national forest lands that have never been developed will stay that way. And in some areas that are accessible by roads, the regulations will permit logging only to help with firefighting or other preservation activities.
Today we free the land so that they will remain unspoiled by bulldozers, undisturbed by chainsaws, and untouched for our children.
The sweeping plan, which is being blasted by energy, timber, and mining industries, is just the latest in a flurry of major last-minute environmental initiatives. The Clinton administration has given several wildlife areas the same status as national monuments, banned oil drilling off the coast of California, and outlawed snowmobiling in national parks.
These are public lands. They're not Bill Clinton's lands, and they're not the federal government's lands. I find all of what he's done objectionable because he denied the people their right to speak on how these lands get designated.
Other Republicans called the regulations fatally flawed and vowed to find a way to get them overturned. One way might be with the help of President-elect Bush.
This administration in its final days has been a busy beaver, and we will review all regulations and executive orders upon coming into office on January 20th.
But reversing the forest plan may not be so easy. Some Republicans support President Clinton's action, and getting a new rule in place would seem to require another lengthy round of public hearings and review. At the White House, David Schuster, Fox News.
Oregon environmentalists are making another final appeal to President Clinton to designate another national monument, this one protecting more than 1 million acres in southwestern Oregon. It represents the biggest chunk of undeveloped forest on the west coast. The Wild Rivers National Monument proposal is not among the areas the president earmarked for preservation.
Just days before the end of his administration, President Clinton will make one of his most significant conservation actions. Today, he plans to announce a new Forest Service regulation that eventually puts 58 million acres off limits to most road construction, logging, and commercial development. Much of the land is in the Rocky Mountains. Critics warn it will block drilling for natural gas needed to heat homes. Logging, mining, and drilling interests threaten a legal and political fight to overturn the measure, but supporters call it a masterstroke of environmental defense.
What we will have is for our children and grandchildren a heritage of wild forest lands that will be available for centuries.
President-elect George W. Bush says he will consider opening at least one wildlife area to oil drilling. And Gail Norton, Bush's pick to run the Interior Department, is a critic of land regulation as well.
You're watching Fox 2, Hawaii's news channel. Broadcasting from the KHON TV Broadcast Center in Hawaii Tower. This is the Channel 2 News at 10 with Joe Moore, Hawaii's #1 news.
It appears that President Bill Clinton wants to leave the Oval Office with a legacy of environmental initiatives. Today, Mr. Clinton declared about 60 million acres of forest land off limits, and that has timber industry officials and some Republicans up in arms. David Schuster reports.
Determined to establish an environmental legacy, President Clinton appeared in the National Arboretum and declared nearly a third of the country's federal forest lands off limits to most logging.
I am proud to announce that we will protect nearly 60 million acres of pristine forest land for future generations. That is an area greater in size than all national parks combined.
It's also an area that includes 9 million acres in Alaska's Tongass National Forest, something the administration wasn't even considering 6 months ago. Under the rules, the Forest Service will ban road building where no roads currently exist. That means all national forest lands that have never been developed will stay that way. And in some areas that are accessible by roads, the regulations will permit logging only to help with firefighting or other preservation activities.
Today we free the land so that they will remain unspoiled by bulldozers, undisturbed by chainsaws, and untouched for our children.
The sweeping plan, which is being blasted by energy, timber, and mining industries, is just the latest in a flurry of major last-minute environmental initiatives. The Clinton administration has given several wildlife areas the same status as national monuments, banned oil drilling off the coast of California, and outlawed snowmobiling in national parks.
These are public lands. They're not Bill Clinton's lands, and they're not the federal government's lands. I find all of what he's done objectionable because he denied the people their right to speak on how these lands get designated.
One way might be with the help of President-elect Bush.
This administration in its final days has been a busy beaver, and we will review all regulations and executive orders upon coming into office on January 20th.
But reversing the forest plan may not be so easy. Some Republicans support President Clinton's action, and getting a new rule in place would seem to require another lengthy round of public hearings and review. At the White House, David Schuster, Fox News.
Had several new water main breaks today in the city of Jackson, and it's affecting local businesses in ways you may not realize. U.S. Attorney Brad Pygott talks to us about his decision to resign. And 2 buildings and several acres of land are lost in a grass fire in Byron.
You're watching the WLBT 6 p.m. report.
Tonight, Jackson's and the U.S. Forest Service has dropped plans for 5 timber sales projects on public lands. The project areas were in the DeSoto, Homachita, and Tom Bigby National Forests. The Sierra Club named those projects along with more than 50 others in the South in a lawsuit aimed at halting logging. The suit said the logging practices would cause severe harm to numerous forest species.
President Clinton will approve a new Forest Service regulation that will put 58 million acres, much of it in the off-limits Rockies, off-limits to most road construction. No new logging or commercial development allowed, but critics warn that it'll block drilling for natural gas that's needed to heat homes. Locations included in the ban are the Pagoda Peak in Colorado, the American River's North Fork in California, South Quinault Ridge in Washington State, and in 2004, the Tongass National Forest in Alaska will be added. And welcome back. It's the biggest land conservation effort in decades. President Clinton is approving an order putting close to 1/3 of national forest land permanently off limits to future road building, logging, and oil drilling. Opponents are already hoping to stop the plan. Leanne Gregg reports now from Denver.
A massive protection plan means no more new logging, no new roads, and no oil and gas development across close to 60 million acres of national forest, much of it in the Rockies. In the final days of his administration, President Clinton announces approval of the historic regulation affecting land in 39 states.
Today we free the land so that they will remain unspoiled by bulldozers, undisturbed by chainsaws, and untouched for our children.
Included in the ban, Pagoda Peak in Colorado, the American River's North Fork in California, South Quinault Ridge in Washington State, and later in 2004, Alaska's Tongass National Forest. Critics from logging, mining, and drilling interests say they plan to block the Clinton regulation, threatening legal and political fights.
We've got a crisis here, an energy crisis, and we simply have to have these lands available for exploration.
Supporters of the Clinton plan say it's the legacy and heritage of wild forest lands they want to protect.
It's something that the American people who really love their forest really want to see happen.
Controversy over whether a great step forward or intrusion into land use decisions. The Clinton administration leaves with one of the biggest land protection moves in American history. Leanne Gregg, NBC News, Denver.
38 states with roadless areas will be subject to the president's forest conservation effort. And New Mexico and Texas will be states that will benefit from this effort. According to the U.S. Forest Service, about 4,000 acres will be protected throughout Texas. And in Mexico, 1,597,000 acres will be protected.
News on the American economy, and the Fed adds another interest rate cut. But will that be enough to head off a recession? Off limits. President Clinton's surprise move to save millions of acres of national forest. But will it save his legacy? In depth, the fugitives. The manhunt for 7 dangerous criminals goes nationwide as the FBI steps in. And the fleecing of America. Missing children. What could be worse? Taking advantage of that tragedy.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw.
At the same time, President Clinton is racing the clock, trying to catch a Republican president on the question of legacy. That president was Theodore Roosevelt. The legacy was the American wilderness. NBC's Bob Kerr tonight on this president's latest plan and the opposition lining up. Robert?
Hi there, Tom. Well, it's the biggest move of its kind in U.S. history, and in the final days of the Clinton administration, one of its most significant conservation actions. Tomorrow, the president approves a new Forest Service regulation that eventually puts 58 million acres, much of it in the Rockies, off limits to most road construction. No new logging or commercial development. And critics warn it'll block drilling for natural gas needed to heat homes. Included in the ban immediately, Pagoda Peak in Colorado, the American River's North Fork in California, South Quinault Ridge in Washington State, and later, in 2004, Alaska's Tongass National Forest.
What we will have is for our children and grandchildren a heritage of wild forest lands that will be available for centuries.
Supporters call it a masterstroke of environmental defense, but logging, mining, and drilling interests threaten a legal and political fight to overturn the move. Battles that are complicated, costly, and could take years. Yet some in Congress already urging President-elect Bush to try to scrap what they call misguided regulations.
We've got a crisis here, an energy crisis, and we simply have to have these lands available for exploration.
Bush, a former Texas oil man, says he'd consider opening at least one wildlife area to oil drilling. And Gail Norton, Bush's pick to run the Interior Department, is a critic of land regulation.
Any fights to overturn this won't be resolved until Bill Clinton is long gone from the White House, content he did what he could for his legacy. Tom?
So are those critics correct when they say this is just a land grab to promote the Clinton legacy? NBC's Andrea Mitchell takes a closer look tonight at what seems to be the president's rush to make history in his final days.
When it comes to his legacy, Bill Clinton is playing beat the clock, and not just to protect forests. He's also expected to designate as national monuments 5 more scenic areas in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and 2 in Montana. 13 previous presidents have used the same 1906 law to protect pristine lands, but none more than Clinton. And there's more.
Strokes. Tomorrow, President Clinton will approve regulations that will ban roads on millions of acres of Forest Service land. Most of the 58 million acres of land eventually included in the ban are in the Rocky Mountains. Critics say the ban will block access to natural gas fields. A discarded cigarette and not a car fire may have caused a wildfire that scorched more than 10,000 acres and several homes in California. Nearly 2,000 firefighters are battling the blaze outside of San Diego. Officials say while the Santa Ana winds are dying down, the fire is still burning out of control.
Well, Kim Bellick joins us now.
From NBC News, this is Today with Katie Couric and Matt Lauer, live from Studio 1A in Rockefeller Plaza.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Today on this Friday morning. I'm Katie Couric.
And I'm Matt Lauer. Officials say they believe
Firefighters outside San Diego say they are winning the battle against that big wildfire today. They hope to have it fully contained by tomorrow. High winds have died down, helping them out. The rare wintertime fire has charred 11,000 acres so far and destroyed at least 5 homes. Investigators think the blaze started when someone threw a cigarette from a car window. Ford
Quarters in New York. This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We're going to begin tonight with We're going to take a closer look tonight at the federal regulation which the president approved today to effectively put millions of acres of public land off limits to future development or exploitation. More than 58 million acres of public land in 39 states will be protected from road building and from logging. Now, Mr. Clinton portrays this as an act of conservation in the interest of the nation as a whole, but he's bypassed the Congress, and those who disagree with what he's done will have a very tough job undoing it if they choose to try. First, the scope of it. Here's ABC's Barry Seraphin.
Under the new regulation, new roads and most logging will be banned on nearly 1/3 of this country's national forest land, an area twice the size of North Carolina. The president says that will protect pristine forests and critical wildlife habitat.
The beauty of our wild lands will now be there for our children and all our children for all time to come.
Environmentalists who have fought hard for the roadless plan call it historic.
This is a truly extraordinary decision. I think it really is a landmark decision.
The plan does allow logging in cases where timber sales have already been approved or where it might be necessary to prevent forest fires. But the timber industry and others say it is a setback.
When a fire is going over the ridge, you can't be asking permission to build a road.
Analysts say there will be no major impact on the timber industry, but the roadless rule does mean less access for logging, mining, and drilling, as well as some recreation use. Some states say they did not have enough input and will try to scuttle the new regulation.
It leaves Idaho and a number of states no recourse but go to the federal court, file suit.
The U.S. Forest Service says one stark fact cannot be ignored. It says it cannot afford more roads. There are already 386,000 miles of roads in national forests, far more than the interstate highway system, and an $8.4 billion maintenance backlog.
Still, it appears that the latest and largest part of what the president sees as his environmental legacy will be challenged.
a controversy over public lands that will go on long after Mr. Clinton leaves office. Barry Sarafin, ABC News, Washington.
Mr. Clinton has worked to protect more public land from development than any president since Theodore Roosevelt. And in these final days of his presidency, Mr. Clinton is eagerly using his presidential powers to put his stamp on environmental policy. Here's ABC's John Cochran.
President Clinton had only to look outside the White House windows and see the stands being erected for George Bush's inaugural parade, a reminder that it was now or never to make environmental history.
He's concerned about his legacy, and I think he has shown many times that he's capable of kind of poking Congress in the eye and poking Republicans in the eye when he has to.
Protecting forests was a lot easier for Mr. Clinton than some of his other attempts to build a legacy, such as peacemaking in the Middle East. And he's made it as hard as possible for Republicans to overturn what he has done. Republicans are steaming over a long list of Mr. Clinton's recent moves, including new clean air standards for diesel fuel and new workplace safety rules.
We haven't seen probably as much environmental and economic damage going out the door since Saddam Hussein torched the oil fields in Kuwait at the end of the Gulf War.
But Republicans probably do not have the votes to do much about it. And it could take George Bush years to go through the cumbersome rule-making process to reverse what Mr. Clinton has done.
This administration in its final days has been a busy beaver, and we will review all regulations and executive orders upon coming into office on January 20th.
Actually, all presidents in their final days make heavy use of their powers while they can. But Mr. Clinton is in a class by himself, putting a record number of rule-making pages in the Federal Register. And aides say he isn't finished yet. John Cochran, ABC News, the White House.
One other item from Washington today: on Capitol Hill, an agreement to share power in the new Senate.
Hello, welcome. Thanks for being with us. In his waning days in office, President Clinton sidestepped Congress today to trigger the biggest conservation program in decades. Within the past hour, Mr. Clinton issued an order that bans logging and drilling in national forests in 39 states. The order affects some 58 million acres, 1/3 of the land in the national forest system. Now joining us from the White House, CNN's Eileen O'Connor with more on the last-minute efforts to leave a legacy. Eileen.
Well, U.S. officials point out that the president has been working on this rule for over a year, Joey, and they say it will protect 58.5 million acres of national forest. Basically, what the rule does is it prohibits logging and the creation of roads in these great national forests. Now, the area actually covers more area than the national parks in the United States combined. It covers 39 states. It's being hailed by environmentalists as one of the most sweeping acts of conservation in decades. And also, the president proposed the rule, and in the waning days of his office, as you said, it is one of his biggest environmental initiatives. The U.S. officials say it will take the Bush administration some period of time, though, to overturn this rule. They, too, would have to have a public comment period as well. The president says he's doing this to preserve the open spaces of America for future generations.
We will protect nearly 60 million acres of pristine forest land for future generations. That is an area greater in size than all our national parks combined. From the Appalachian Mountains to the Sierra Nevada, forest land in 39 states will be preserved in all its splendor, off limits to road building and logging that would destroy its timeless beauty.
But even the National Forest Service, in an economic impact review for this rule, did say that it would eliminate some 400 jobs in the Tongass Forest in Alaska. Some 95% of the timber harvest there would be eliminated. And critics say this new rule could also make it harder for people to manage forests, to prevent wildfires and insect infestation. And also, other critics say that it was unnecessary, that in fact it is squandering the natural resources that America has.
We have a 17 million acre virgin forest, 30% of which the timber is dead or dying and has no other useful purpose other than wood fiber, which of course went into the pulp mills. So as we look at this action, clearly it's an effort to accommodate environmental.
Yo, Michelle.
The State Farm U.S. Figure Skating Championships, Saturday on ABC.
Next, light rail is as close to reality as it can be. Construction of the much criticized project became official today.
Also ahead, Senator Wellstone breaks his promise not to run again. You'll see his reasons why.
Plus, Glenn Mason is not moving on to Ohio State.
Live from KSTP-TV, this is Channel 5 Eyewitness News at 6.
Good evening, I'm Harris Faulkner.
And I'm Randy Meyer. Julie is off tonight. Gopher football coach Glenn Mason will not get a shot at his dream job. His alma mater, Ohio State, is giving it to another coach. Joe Schmidt has the story from Williams Arena, where he's getting ready to cover Gopher basketball tonight for us. Joe, you think Mason's pretty disappointed with this?
Well, we haven't heard yet from Mason. It's going to be interesting to see what he has to say, but there's no question that Mason wanted this job, and he wanted this job badly. But Ohio State will announce tomorrow that Youngstown State head coach Jim Tressel is their new football coach, which means that Mason will have to mend some fences back here in Minnesota with alumni and fans. Mason was actually in Columbus today for his second interview. He was the last candidate that the Buckeyes talked to. Mason met with the athletic director, university president, and the search committee this morning. But later in the afternoon, word had leaked out that Mason was passed over and that Jim Tressel had gotten the job. Tressel coached with Mason in the mid-1980s at Ohio State. Mason first interviewed for this job 10 days ago, and during that time he continued to recruit as the head coach of the University of Minnesota. But once again, Randy, it'll be interesting to hear what Coach Mason has to say. We hope to have that tonight at 10.
All right, Joe, we'll check back with you a bit later on. Thank you. One of the most controversial ideas ever considered in the Twin Cities is now on track.
It was 30 years in the making. It's the light rail line along Hiawatha Avenue. Government leaders officially broke ground on the $675 million project today. The line will stretch from downtown Minneapolis to Fort Snelling by 2003, and by 2004, it will be finished and ready to take passengers all the way to the airport and to the Mall of America. Eyewitness News reporter Kristen Steiner has a close look at the first official steps for light rail. Kristen?
Harris, I'm standing in downtown Minneapolis, right in the middle of the entertainment district. This is where the first stop on the LRT line will be. Now, the Met Council just got the word go yesterday with the signing of a $334 million grant from the federal government to help pay for the project. They wasted no time breaking ground today.
The Cedar River Station is going to be right here.
Robert Johnson is 71 years old and has been waiting for a light rail system in the Twin Cities